Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 26. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cybersafe Digest, episode 26. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of Neuways, and I'm here with
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at Neuways.
Toby. We're going to be talking about World Password Day, which was actually last week.
Yep.
But I think I ought to mention that it's not World Password Day is not a unique day. We have several others that are happening this month. I ought to mention them just so you are aware. So on the 29th, it's National Biscuit Day.
Okay.
On the 12th, it's National Topiary Day.
Okay.
So you need to get out there and look at your hedges.
Yes, I look forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah. The 9th is National Lost Sock Day.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can empathise with that one.
Yeah, and I presume that's to go and look for lost socks rather than go and lose socks. I'm not sure. And the whole month is worthwhile stating that it's Zombie Awareness Month.
Now that is the one. That is the one we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So I thought I'd just make sure we weren't just talking about the one thing that we're here to talk about today, which was passwords. So we've got some statistics here, and maybe you want to just run through those.
Yeah.
Because it still amazes me that such statistics exist.
Yes, exactly, and there'll be variation depending on the source that you look at, but the general theme is there or thereabouts. We find that we know that people reuse passwords, people are rubbish at remembering passwords, and that's kind of the perennial problem. And some of this data bears this out. So from different attacks, breaches, data around how this happened and where it's password related. The passwords that we used are obviously compiled. And this particular piece of analysis demonstrates that over 23 million accounts worldwide used the super excellent password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm so should you repeat that? 'Cause I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can remember it.
Yeah, no, it's quite complicated. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I could use that in future myself because I just about remember that. That's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so and there are other ones like that. I mean, there's a list of, depending on where you go, top 10, top 20, top 30, and things like QWERTY. Again, it's one row below on the keyboard. It's the same. It's the same kind of thing. We also find from the same report that 2/3 of users are sharing passwords with colleagues. So it's kind of driving down that complexity level, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is easy to remember if I want to share that with you.
Yes.
But something that is perhaps a mixture of upper and lower case numbers and characters, I can't quite easily explain that to you, and you can't recite it back so easily.
Okay.
And then this one's a slightly concerning one. And I think there's something we can unpack when we talk around this a little bit later. 57% of people said that they find that password management is irritating and stops them doing their jobs. So they just don't bother.
Yeah.
And I infer from that as in a password management tool or some kind of password management policy that precludes certain types of behaviour. So it's just ignored and overridden. It
is remarkable. I think those first two statistics are the most terrifying ones. Using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I remembered it. Remarkable. Is a staggering thing. And considering it's one of the first things even half wit of a hacker might try.
Yes, it's such low-hanging fruit. It's subterranean.
Yes,
it's not even dragging on the floor.
Yes,
going for known compromised passwords is kind of like the first thing that will happen, because human beings are creatures of habit, and they do things that are not right all the time, and not just individuals but at scale.
So okay, let's talk about what makes a good password. We'll talk about two things here. One is what makes a good password, and then later on we'll talk about password management, whether the best way to do that. So a good password, I mean, what is a good password? What should the minimum requirement?
Yeah, but passwords are emotive things, really. Some vendors are actually implementing technologies to drive you away from passwords altogether.
Sure.
But the reality is that passwords will be around for a while because there's lots of bits of software that lean on them and use them. In terms of what makes a good password, the current data is saying that length, having a long password, is the most important thing. And in fact, that then transitions it from password to passphrase, because there's not that many really long words that you can use. And if you stitch together 2, 3, 4 short words, again, they're easy to break. So the general consensus at the moment, so the data coming out of the NCSC is 12 characters or more for regular user accounts, and 16 to 24 or greater minimum for privileged users, so administrator type accounts. So those are where more damage can be done.
But I mean, let's talk about. I'm going to forgive me, folks. Normal users. It's been a bit of an evolution, and certainly for myself, I don't mind admitting it, where I used the same password for everything some years ago, and then I realised that it wasn't complicated enough, so I complicated it, and it was a word I knew, and I changed the letter order and such like, but then I did use it for several accounts, and of course the best practice really is to have a complex password for each account that you use.
Yeah. So length is really important. So the longer the better, but also uniqueness is also critical. In terms of minimizing the blast radius of a breach a breach password, a breach credential. Because if, let's say, your LinkedIn password was compromised, and LinkedIn has been known to have these kinds of problems in the past, there'll be I don't know the number, but there'll be a significant majority out there that are reusing a password from somewhere else to sign into LinkedIn. And when people have to remember passwords, because people are not very good at remembering passwords, they tend to reuse the same handful. And they get around complexity by putting exclamation marks in, or hashes, or dollar symbols, those kinds of things. Perhaps letter substitution, a 3 for an E, or vice versa. The reality is that an attacker's set of dictionary attacks knows how people think, and they will use all of these techniques to expand the list of words that they use to try and break into your system with.
Okay, so we've talked about complexity, we've talked about not using the same password, but of course, an interesting thing that came up the other day actually is we were working on one particular account we work with where it identified that changing passwords hadn't been done enough. But there's a peculiar thing there about the different view there, isn't there, in terms of changing passwords?
So password aging is really emotive might be too strong a word, but it definitely polarizes opinion.
I'm willing to have an argument about it.
So in the red corner, there's a school of thought that says change your password on an agreed cadence, so every 90 days, 60 days, 180 days, something like that. Because then if your password has been guessed and is being used, you will then change it, and you then eventually knock the attacker out. The efficacy of such a strategy is debatable, and the reality is that a lot of compliance requirements mandate certain things. So if you want to get PCI DSS, so if you handle credit card payments with your own systems, you don't use an external payment provider or something like that, and you need to be PCI accredited, there'll be rules in there around how you manage passwords. And there's an expectation there that you change your passwords on a regular basis, irrespective. Now, the naysayers to that approach will say, well, this just encourages people to put a number on the end and increment it. Or have spring 24, summer 24, autumn 24. So something that is different, has got a mix of has got the complexity requirements, which is upper lowercase number character. You've got to choose 3 of them normally in Windows. But of course, as you can see, they are quite poor examples, but they meet the requirements.
So here's a question. So thinking about our listeners here, and this is aimed at people who are in charge of IT, responsible for IT, but don't necessarily execute IT within organizations, CEOs and CFOs. Think about Cybersafe. Cyber Essentials, my apologies, and Cyber Essentials Plus. What's the opinion
there? So there's a character limit.
Yep.
But they don't go into any huge detail around how you handle the changing of passwords. It's more along the lines of you change passwords when you think it's been breached or you suspect it has been. Okay. So the NCSC is very much in that corner at the moment, in the blue corner, the opposing corner, which is don't change your password on a regular schedule, because it just encourages this kind of poor password behavior. Some of the vendors there, so Microsoft, for example, they're in a position where they say, again, don't change your password unless you believe it's been breached. Handily, Microsoft sells solutions that will help you alert to erroneous login behavior, which would be an indicator to say my password's been breached.
Wow.
So who'd thought it?
Who would have thought it? I was about to say exactly the same thing.
But but that's the other approach. So create a really, really strong password. And don't ever change it until you suspect that somebody else knows it.
And let's just again refine that. Create a really strong password per account. And then don't change. Now, the thing that's changed my life, there's a lot of things that changed my life, but particularly is a password manager.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, there was a time in the past, some time ago, where I had a little book with my passwords in, which was stayed with me at all times, of course, but was not the best thing I could ever do. But it did mean have a password for every different account, for a different account. Password manager, firstly, really hit me through the use of an Apple iPhone, because you get keychain with that. And that does certainly make password management.
Yeah, definitely.
It suggests complex passwords. It makes life a lot easier. But for organizations, going out and getting a password manager would seem to make sense. It's something we've done for a long time now. And frankly, I mean, personally, again, I use my iCloud keychain for my personal passwords, and I use the business password manager for business passwords. And going back to the statistics earlier on, 57% of people said they find password management an irritation. That stops them using it. They're not that complex to use. They're a bit of an overhead.
They are, in the same way that multi-factor authentication it is an overhead and gets in the way. But the reality is, it doesn't that much, and you kind of get used to it as part of your day-to-day. And certainly in the case of password managers, I can't think of many people that have used one for any length of time and could imagine working without one.
And I guess, just finish off this little bit of here is, it really is a given that you should use a password manager if you can, and you should. But the inconvenience that you may feel that you're suffering compared to the inconvenience of a hack and the implications of that would strikes me that it would be insignificant by comparison.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing around password managers to think around as well is just to make that clear delineation between a password manager tool, so a password vault tool, and saving passwords in the browser. Because the browser vendors will always have a pop-up saying, do you want to save this password? Do you want to save this password? And it's convenient and it's easy, and you get all of the benefits of a password manager, because when you go back to that site, it will inject the credentials in and it's easy to sign back in. Problem is, the same mechanism that allows that injection to happen can be exploited by an attacker with a rogue web page and extract the credentials out of the browser. And a password vault, a password manager solution has additional mechanisms to prevent that from happening. So storing passwords in the browser is not a great idea. And in fact, as part of a proper and complete password management deployment, you would actually take steps to disable the storage of passwords in the browser, because the danger is that you have a password manager application and it keeps popping up saying, do you want to save your password? And you think, this password manager is brilliant.
Yes.
But it's saving more in the browser because something is getting there first.
But of course, the other thing to recognize from that, I would have thought, is that it's entirely local to the user.
Well, it is, or sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So both Chrome and Edge, and I think Firefox, allow you to sign into the browser which then creates a synced copy of all of your pages and passwords and things.
Okay, let me refine that. So it's local to the user, not to the organization.
Yeah. So again, this is another important thing, and then it's who's got the ownership of the credential.
Yes,
because you're absolutely right. That there could be real challenges in retrieving those safe passwords from the browser. So even before we think about a cybersecurity incident, we're thinking about a continuity or succession or whatever you want to term it, but keeping the business running with the passwords that a particular individual has.
Yes.
They're all stored in the browser, and they've logged into the browser with their personal account. They're taking those passwords with them. Now, the problem there is you then can't get them back, so that creates a potential operational issue, but you still don't know what they've taken. So you may not know all of the things that they've got access to and how to go out about resetting all of those things.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend recently who had an employee leave sort of 18 months ago. And they only realised last week that that person was still using their credit reference agency login and password. At their cost. Thank you very much. Because they still had the credentials.
Yeah.
So another thing really is about owning the credentials at a corporate level, at a business level, is quite important for that succession thing. But also, if a person leaves, you may want to change those passwords anyway. If they're, and we'll quickly talk about the situation where a shared password is sort of unavoidable, about how best to manage that.
And I think the other thing, just before we move off of that, so what we're saying here is that an organisation can have an advantage in providing a password management tool because it will be managed by the organisation, and those passwords, those credentials, become the property of the business or owned by the business, for want of a better term. The issue that you sometimes face then is an individual say, well, I'll save my passwords in there because you can then see what my bank account details are, or this or that or the other. I think the thing that's really important to note is that most of these tools will operate what's known as a zero knowledge configuration, so that the organization can't just look into passwords willy-nilly. There's quite a complicated recovery process that you have to go through to rescue the password vault back. You can gain access to it, but it would mean that the boss can't look at the passwords of all the employees and do things. They would have to go through a process to recover the credentials through an official mechanism if that employee was to leave. So it's important, because we talk about password management is an irritation that stops people doing the jobs. This stat from earlier on, 57% said it's not for me. These are the sorts of concerns that people have. Well, I'm not putting passwords in there because my boss can see those things, or I don't want them to to be able to see my things. It may be irrational, but that's how people feel, and it's important, I think, to communicate. We can't see your passwords, but we can recover them.
Yes, I think this is the thing about taking the password management of an organization very seriously, because it does protect not only your employees and protects you by dint of that from phishing attacks and things like that, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, but and allowing hackers access those passwords, but it also protects your organization, which is actually probably really, really important, because again, somebody not taking care could cause your business to fail ultimately. Okay. I'm just talking about phishing awareness there. So we talked about this in episode 4 at some length, but people are trying to capture your password through phishing attacks. So what's the mechanism, Toby? Not that I'm accusing you of doing it, but you're aware of it.
How passwords are captured? Yeah. So as you say, it starts off with a phishing email. Normally comes in and there's those call to actions, time sensitive. So we've changed our remote access system. You need to click here and sign in to confirm your account before we turn the old one off at the end of the day.
Yes.
And people think, oh, I better go and do it quickly because otherwise I'm going to get locked out.
Or we've just taken a payment from your bank account. Or from your PayPal account, whatever, and it's a ridiculous sum.
If you don't recognise it, log in and check, and they provide a handy login button on the page. So something pops up to get you to try and click on it. You then click on it, and you then get sent to an erroneous page, which will have a URL that is either not at all convincing or is semi-convincing. So, sometimes you see things like Microsoft-login.com. And it could be plausible if you're busy or you're particularly concerned about the message you're receiving. You're rushing through things. And then when you put your credentials in there, they get harvested by the attacker.
Sure.
Because they're in control of that site and they can see everything you're typing in.
Okay. And just another word of warning, which you've talked about before, is a screen real estate here. If you try and handle those emails on a mobile phone whilst you're on the train or whatever, or busy in the corner of a meeting, it will look more convincing. Is probably the best way I can describe it.
It's harder to discern that it's a fake one or it's a phishing email because of the relative lack of information you get, because the message body content is prioritized over everything else.
Yeah, and what I'd say to you, the best thing I've learned over the years is that if I get that sort of email on my, and I'm looking at my phone, I tend to go, don't panic, Martin. Look at this on a proper laptop screen or proper computer screen at some point and discern whether it's right.
Yeah.
But actually, the real piece of advice here is if somebody's saying such a thing, don't use any links within the email. Go to the website.
Oh yeah, as always. Yeah, I mean that would be phishing awareness 101, really. Yeah, don't click on anything in the email if you suspect it's dodgy.
Okay, so authentication. So we can. Wouldn't that be a lovely thing? And in some way, we've got biometrics now. Again, I go back to my iPhone. By the way, not that many years ago, I didn't like Apple, and now I'm a bit of a devotee, because I think they just do it very well. Just works.
Yeah, they do make it simple, and as you say, biometric is a very useful thing. So the shift towards passwordless is really to try and combat all of these flaws that we spoke around in passwords. They're hard to remember, they're easy to share, they're easy to give away by accident. Passwordless tries to make it less about that and more about something that you have or something that you are. Because you can't really share your face or your thumb or a digital certificate.
Not that getting too gruesome with it.
No, true. So I suppose if you think about when we talk about multi-factor authentication and how that supports the username and password piece, so that's something that the username and password, and then there's something that you have, which is normally the authenticator app. So passwordless kind of takes that same concept and kind of bundles them all together. So on a Microsoft PC, it's called Windows Hello. That's a biometric system. If you use Hello for Business, it will integrate with your 365 estate and allow you to sign into your email with your face.
Is that an extra cost?
No, well, it's not. No, actually.
Oh, right.
It's not. Although to manage it properly, you need a certain level of licensing. So I suppose indirectly, some people get cut out from it until they reach a certain license level within the Microsoft ecosystem. But technically speaking, the passwordless stuff that Microsoft are doing is completely free. So, and there's been a lot of stuff in the media, on LinkedIn and all about it in the recent weeks, because Microsoft have just launched their passwordless offering for their platform. So you can use this if you've got a personal Microsoft account. So if you're on a Hotmail or an Outlook.com or Live or something like that, you can create passwordless logins for that. And similarly, if you're an organization, you can have your admin team or your service provider enable the features that allow passwordless to work, and you can essentially use something called passkeys, which is a form of this passwordless world. This is what Microsoft has just released, the passkeys. It's an extension to your Microsoft Authenticator app, and it is a device-bound token. So it's specific to that phone. So it's kind of the something that you have, and it's protected by something that you are.
Okay. So, I mean, in summary, there's no reason why you shouldn't manage your passwords better. And frankly, anybody with a password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if I remember correctly, 6.
Yes.
Then it's almost a dereliction of duty to yourself and your organisation.
It is, yeah, because and it's something that's actually quite simple to fix. It's something that doesn't really cost anything to fix, and people will spend hundreds and thousands of pounds on other security software. Yet, if they're not addressing the most fundamental part of it, the passwords, or the authentication mechanism, then a lot of those protections can just be bypassing. A lot of attackers don't hack in or break in; they log in.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to make sure that authentication is strong. Why MFA is so really, really important, but passwords are too.
That's the point, actually. It's easier to log in than it is to hack.
Yeah, and we spoke around very briefly today around how a phishing attack will harvest credentials. There are criminal gangs that's all they do. They just harvest credentials, then they sell them on.
Yeah.
They're not interested in doing the attacking. That's not their thing. They are reselling credentials.
Marvelous.
And they get really good at it. They get really convincing with the phishing scams and everything, because the better that they can hook people in, the more material they've got to sell.
Fantastic. So this actually leads to quite nicely to another method of making life easier.
Yeah.
And this is our acronym of this week.
Yeah.
Which is SSO.
Yes.
Go ahead, Toby.
Single sign-on.
Right.
So single sign-on is kind of the clues in the name, really.
We could stop there.
It's a technology that allows you to sign on once, and that authentication session that you have been granted can then be reused and replayed with other systems that are configured to accept it.
Now, let's just to make this clear. I mean, single sign-on applies to an environment.
Yes.
That you could hold your password and things like that.
Yeah. So as an organization, you would need to use a single sign-on provider as your authentication or your identity provider. Yeah. And many organizations use Microsoft.
Yeah.
So you can use single sign-on. You can enable single sign-on with Microsoft and use your Azure AD, Entra ID as a single sign-on provider. And then you can then point your web applications at that. So rather than having a set of logins for Xero or QuickBooks or your CRM system or whatever your cloud application is, you configure that to point to your single sign-on provider. And when you go there, it will say, "Oh, have you already signed in?" "Yes, I've signed in." "Okay." And it lets you straight in. You don't have to put new usernames and passwords in. The real advantage with one of the real advantages with single sign-on means that we reduce the number of passwords that we actually need.
Yes.
Because we're reusing in the background, so we're not retyping it in, but it's automatically using the authentication that we've been presented with when we signed on the first login of the day. So if you're on a PC that is connected to Microsoft Intune, when you sign into that, you're effectively authenticating to Microsoft. Then when you go to your CRM system or to your finance system, if these are all cloud-based things and they're configured for single sign-on, they will take that same authentication, just pass you straight through into the application because you're already signed in.
Yeah.
Now, the advantage of that is that it means we have fewer credentials, so less things to have to remember. It means that we can focus as a human, our limited brain capacity on remembering a really good password or passphrase, using MFA to support that, or indeed maybe passwordless.
Yes.
As a defender of a system, it means that we've got far fewer logs to look through. So we've put down the number of ways that people get into our system because we're only using the single sign-on provider, so we can really focus our monitoring, our attentions on that. So it is a really, really good thing. One slight criticism of some vendors in the ecosystem is that they charge extra to enable single sign-on for their platforms, which is it's a disgrace.
Yes.
Microsoft comes with a lot of fire for putting a lot of its security features behind a paywall, but they are not the only vendor that does this, and it is a real shame because actually it aids usability, and it aids security.
The usability thing I'd say is absolutely true. Very fact, so I can come into the office here and sign on once and then get to all the applications I need is to make sure.
And the great thing is your user experience is that it's all seamless.
Yes.
Our experience as the defenders of this organization, we can see in the logs that you've gone onto this system and that system. We can see all the authentication passes. So we know that it's all working. It's not just like an open door. We know that there is an authentication challenge response going on all the time. It's just that you, as the end user, don't see it, which again is great for the experience.
Brilliant. Well, that's been really useful. So that was all about World Password Day, and of course, I'll just remind people that it's Zombie Awareness Month. Don't forget, and I'm trying to see if there's any connection between anybody using a very simple password 1 2 3 4 5 6 and Zombie Awareness Month. Maybe you can get that connection at some time. Who knows? Toby, thank you very much.
Okay.
Very, very interesting. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 26 of our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.